While many religious traditions and institutions optimize for existential coherency, I optimize for ontological accuracy, which means that I want to have the truth. I'm not necessarily a truth maximalist per se, because I understand and respect that there are certain things that have utility that are not true, that are actually going to be maybe more beneficial for the psyche in the long term than if something is true, but it's going to destabilize you to the point in which you can't function anymore. And I think that this is why some people, like Friedrich Nietzsche, for example, went mad by the end of his life, is because he perhaps, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but he perhaps pursued truth so hard to the point in which he was willing to sacrifice his stability psychologically for the sake of the truth. Whereas someone like Carl Jung, for example, he would optimize for psychic wholeness. And I think that that's a good approach, but I'm neither a Nietzschean or a Jungian at the end of the day. I would say I wouldn't say I'm my own philosophy, because a lot of people would consider themselves who are, philosophical or pursuing truth to be special. Everybody thinks that they're special. But the thing is that I would say that most people in today's society are simply autistic egomaxers that really don't aim for anything other than to just live on in the day for the moment. And they're so focused on the future or repressed from their past that they can't truly live in the present, and yet they're highly impulsive, more so than anybody else. And it's interesting because when you live in the present, you no longer really become impulsive. You might have impulsive tendencies, but it's not the case that that's going to be the case. And so sometimes people have this proclivity to really just overthink about their future, the past, to the degree in which it just psychs them out of their whole entire being. And I myself, I want to have high integrity in my epistemological structure, as well as resistance to ideological framework that capitalizes on your need for psychological stability. And this is a very difficult line to draw, because most people are going to fall under the category of willing to risk truth for the sake of psychological stability and psychological balance. The issue, though, is that most people, when they pursue that psychological balance, they don't actually have psychological wholeness. And what I mean by that, for an example, is, for example, a highly promiscuous person is going to do what they have always done to achieve that balance internally, which is, in order to keep people around, they have to be hypersexual. And that's what they're going to do. That's what they've been trained to do. So that's how they're going. And that's just, it's not even that they've been trained that way. They've trained themselves this way. And so that's what they do to keep people around, especially women, for example. They really, if they don't know how to keep a man apart from sexual desire, this is a woman that is really not going to be very good for you as a man. And in the same way, a man who only has money, it's not to say that the man is not going to be less appealing, because let's just face it, most women want men with money and resources. And it's not that it's a bad thing that women want this. It's not a bad thing at all. It makes sense. Women are actually far more practical and easygoing than I think most men would like to admit. But they are very, very savage as well. They can be very, very savage. And I've seen that firsthand of what women are capable of. And at first it was rather astonishing, and it was rather destabilizing, but I'm glad to know the truth. And that's the thing about the truth, is that I'm always glad to know more of the truth, even though it hurts. Because the identity that you've placed with certain identity belief systems or faith operations and ways of being, when you let yourself not necessarily detach from reality, but keep yourself flexible in your identity with the truth, then things are going to meander however they need to. And that's really the flow of life. Now, me, myself, I'm a little bit more, some people might say, hyper rationalistic in a flowing, open way, but I don't consider myself to be hyper rational. I just consider myself someone who wants the truth, but recognizes that sometimes there's going to be truth so destabilizing that it can corrupt your own well-being. So, well, then how do you navigate that terrain exactly, right? Well, first of all, you don't be a autistic egomaxer like most people. Obviously, that's not the way. As Carl Jung did talk about as well, it's at least an increase of knowledge to know what not to do, or what you're not, rather than what you are. And that's one thing that you want to be aware of, is that most people who are egomaxing and autistic out here, I swear, the kinds of conversations that most people have are just, they're so mind-numbing. And I genuinely think, it's not even that it's like I've seen this. I don't even need to think about it. I don't need to believe it. I've just simply seen that the energy of people in certain environments can play an impact on the food. For example, you ever been to a restaurant and everybody's very, very happy, and they're not even happy in the sense of like they're putting on a show to be happy. No, they're actually fulfilled in doing what they're doing. There's this sense of lust for life in some sense. They really do love life, and they enjoy it. They really have that zest within them. The food tastes better, I swear. Now look, I haven't been to a restaurant since June of 2024, but I can say that I remember what it's like to go to a restaurant and to feel the vibration, so to speak, of the energy around you, just to feel so in tune, and the food tastes better, the water even tastes better, right? Even though it's just water. And then you go to a restaurant that is kind of, kind of low class. Let's say low vibration. Something like McDonald's. I haven't been to McDonald's since I was in college, years and years ago. Probably 6-7 years now. I haven't been to a McDonald's since then. And even then, I didn't really eat McDonald's much at all. But I went to, when I went to McDonald's last time, I got a hot and spicy. I don't even know if they still have this. I assume they have it, but I got a hot and spicy, and I swear I looked at it and it literally looked sad. You know when you look at the food and it's just like, that literally looks sad, because you can feel the energy of the people around. And like, I've been to McDonald's in the past when I was a young teenager. I've been to McDonald's where people were vigorous and excited about working, and they were just happy to be there. It was a different world. And I mean, it was just, even at McDonald's, you can feel the difference, right? That's really just how life overall is. It's not just about food or restaurants or something. I'm just giving this as an example, right? And most people are so concerned with trying to keep up their image that they become these autistic egomaxers. And it's not to say that the ego, again, is something that you should try to get rid of. It's something that you ought to refine, because the ego is something that will be very useful and true for much of what you need to understand to navigate through this constructed reality. I think one of the reasons that many people think that, or want to think that, hell is a place is because they don't want to accept the possibility that hell is not a place that you go. It's a state of mind you realize you're in. And that is hell. Okay, you want to talk about what hell is? That is hell. And I've been there. And interestingly enough, it is a place, but it's not the type of place that you think it is. It's a place internally. And it doesn't mean that it's not real. It doesn't mean that it's not tangible to some degree as far as your empirical experience. But it is something that many people don't want to admit to, because then that would mean that, well, it makes it true that you're in hell, you're in the apocalypse. And I think, I haven't reached a conclusion on this just yet, but my current understanding with the Regal timeline theory, and the more I integrate it, the more I contemplate it and write about it and such, the more I speak about it, it's almost as if I'm realizing in real time, moving into true time, that the physical plane itself is hellishness and is hell for all intents and purposes. It's when you escape the physical plane and yet you're still in it that you begin to see that. Now look, I'm not saying that the goal is to escape necessarily, because that can be a labyrinth of its own. But what I'm saying is that when you operate from a place internally, that there's something that you need to escape from rather than to just be, then that's where true hellishness lies. And that's in your mind. And most people are there. They just don't even know it. And most people, I think that even myself, it's this strange thing, because we are often ostracized and critiqued for not having a wide network of people and a wide group of people. And I understood that your network is your net worth long ago. I've heard that phrase, and I found it to be very true. However, the thing is that being around people it's kind of encumbersome. I mean, for myself, for example, I sleep on the floor every night now since September last year. And I love it. I really do. I sleep better. I engage more with my dreams. My back feels better when I wake up. It was very sore for the first few days, but afterward it got really straight, really better. I felt much more relaxed waking up. My skeleton was resting when I was sleeping, right? And everything just felt a lot better. And then, I'm just thinking about the way in which I cook my food. I have a set regimen on when I'm cooking what and how I'm cooking what. And even though I'm flexible, I do have a routine of sorts. And that routine does ground me to a large degree. I've been sun gazing more recently, and a lot of people, they just wouldn't, if they looked at my life, people would look at me as if I live like a king in one respect. But then in the other respect, people think, wow, what a bum, right? They would probably think, what a bum. And it's only because of the way that I carry myself that people instead see me as a king, because I walk with a certain sense of intention. I don't do anything just to do it. I'm being, and I'm just being, but I always be as I am, and with what I want to do and what I want to achieve. And even that, I mean, achievement in of itself is a construct. It's a concept. And I am under the philosophy that you are who you are because, well, you are having your achievements because of who you are. Your achievements don't make who you are. It's who you are that makes the achievements. And a lot of people place their achievements as these forms of, well, they simply think that these forms of achievements make them something. And to a degree, sure, absolutely. But also, again, it's depending on how you perceive it. And I think that there's a more holistic viewpoint to see it. And unfortunately, so many people are just so caught up in the social media thing. Like, I've seen really, really significantly smart people on X, for example, and they only have like 150 followers or whatever. And this other guy who has like 100,000 followers will look down upon this person with 150 followers, even though the person with 150 followers, in my mind, makes way more sense of what they're saying than this person with 100,000 followers. And it's because the people with 100,000 followers, like even myself, I have to remind myself, okay, my subscriber count, my follower count, it really doesn't give me the sense of authority that I think it always does sometimes. Like, I've noticed that, like, oh, well, 20,000+ people have apparently thought that I'm worth enough to listen to again, to hit the subscribe button. So, that's what my animalistic ego wants to say, is like, oh, strut my stuff. That's what my ego wants to say. But then I have to layer that field of thought into, just because many people think that what you have to say is interesting doesn't really make it valuable. And it doesn't really make it true either. However, that also doesn't mean that it doesn't make it valuable, and it doesn't make it not true. So there's a true holistic approach that you have to take when you put yourself out there, really, because you have to trust that what you're doing is, well, what you want to be doing. But you also have to trust that you're able to make mistakes. And I don't like when people tell me, for example, oh, well, this is the truth, and it's only just a matter of time until you get there. And they look down upon you, right? Like, they look down upon you. And I'm thinking to myself, I know that you looking at that perspective and me looking at that perspective, my perspective doesn't cancel your perspective. You're trying to cancel my perspective. To me, you're wrong, because you're trying to cancel intentionally my perspective. You're saying that you have some sort of secret knowledge that is unavailable to anybody else. I don't think that's the case. Now, I do think that there are some things that are so valuable that you ought to not really share those unless there's like a paywall, because you probably had years of suffering or thousands of dollars invested, like myself. I've mentioned this multiple times. It's like, why should I give my wisdom and my insight to just anybody for free when it took me tens of thousands of dollars and pain, years and years and years of pain and inner work and practice and repetition and just the discomfort of just life in of itself. Why should I give all of that for free? I'm not God, technically speaking, right? Like I'm a part of godliness and I have godliness, but I'm not God. Okay? I'm not. But I am a form of godliness expressing itself. And we live in a three-dimensional construct filled with multiple dimensions, but we live in a multiple dimensional construct because when you realize what you are is not really who you are, it changes who you are. And that's the real value, right? That's the real value. And that's why you have a paywall for certain things. But anyway, the main point here is that people overestimate their own selves a lot of the time. And in reality, they're mostly just takers. And they're autistic ego maxers. That's just what they are. And they don't realize exactly what they're doing because they're so entitled to feel as if they deserve it when they really don't. And so that's why you have to seek the wholeness with humility, but also understand that truth is important. If you really want the truth, then it's important. But are you being a moral pursuer of truth, or are you actually being a truth seeker? And that's the real question, and that's something that I know I myself, like trying to be like Christ all the time, sometimes, like in the past, I don't say that I do anymore, right? But in the past, it just produces this weird feeling like you have to perform and virtue signal, right? Like you have to virtue signal. I don't want to virtue signal anymore. Like I've got vices. I'm not perfect, but I know that I, from my own perspective, know enough to know what I know and know what I don't know. And to me, and for me, that is enough. And I am enough. I may not be God, but I'm enough. So with all that being said, I hope that this message was useful and insightful for you. Check out the Godlike Mastery offer that I have, or the one-on-one sessions that I offer as well. And I hope everybody stays blessed. Peace. Until next time.